Hello, 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 1, 2, 3, checking 1, 2. I have to hit cancel on that because that's being used by something. Hello, hello. Still sounds thin?
And your level's down about 8 dB.
I don't know. I should probably go find a new hobby.
Rosin up the string on that tin can, man.
Chris, when you found a spot you like, let's do a mic check again.
I can speak into this microphone at the level that I would probably talk, and that's about where I would speak. When I get perplexed, I get quieter, I think.
All right, sounds good. We'll take that.
Rashid liked it from afar.
He's in afar?
Okay. So it is here. How about this, Mickey? I'm speaking. I'm going to talk, and I'm going to make a change. Does it sound different now if I do this? Does it sound the same when I do that? Well, I'll count to 10. Tell me if you hear a difference. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
9 and 10 sounded pretty good.
But did it change during that count, Mitch?
Yes.
It did.
Did it sound better at the beginning or the end?
End. It just had a little more fullness and a low end.
So it sounds better now, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. I don't trust anything you say.
Because I contradicted myself?
Yes.
Because he hasn't
I meant
changed
9 and 10.
anything.
You wholeheartedly contradicted yourself.
I might be stroking out. I don't know.
Nothing. When I got to 10, listen, when I got to 10, it was exactly the way it was when you first said it doesn't sound good.
That's because you weren't saying 9 and 10.
This is Pick on Fenwick Day, and I'm not playing along.
Not really. We're trying to help you, pal.
I'm turning up 2 inputs in the mix pre that have nothing on them. That's what I was changing, Mickey. Anyway, we'll let this go.
You're fine for the show. We can hear all of your thoughts clearly and distinctly.
All of your thoughts. We can hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Bill
Alex,
Kreskin there.
Alex, you need to turn on original sound and log into comms, Mickey is saying.
I have original sound on, and Unity would not kept crashing. So I can't get Unity to turn on. So I'm not on comms. It just hung up. It hung up when I'm trying to set the input. It would just freeze. So I don't know. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussions about digital media production, and our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl graphics. Usually, that's when a network spends a lot of money. We'll see if they did this year. We'll take a look. I'm not sure. Anyways, we'll take a look at it in the second hour. So stay tuned for that. And let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Go ahead, Mitch. What do we have?
Thank you, Alex. First in, Jacob Goodnight from Indianapolis, Indiana, says, Alex, I saw you're speaking at Stream Media Connect this afternoon about how to do virtual and hybrid events right. Will it be recorded or available on demand?
Yeah, I think it will be recorded and available on demand. In the past, Streaming Media has made them available. It is free. So Streaming Media Connect is a free thing. So if you want to see it live, you can. You can just simply register for it. Otherwise, it should be available. And also, I'll post probably later today the talks that I did, the one on digital first events, as well as the interview with Andy Carluccio went live yesterday from the Silicon Valley video, SVV. So we're going to I'll get that onto Discord. So take a look for that. But a lot of good conversations going on. All right, next question.
Matthias Utila from Helsinki, Finland asked, if you use 75 ohm cable for application intended for 50 ohms, like wireless audio antennas, what are the cons of that, and vice versa when using 50 ohm cable for 75 ohm video signals? If the cable runs are for examples below 10 feet, does it matter?
Go ahead, Courtney.
It doesn't matter if you're talking about millivolt ranges of voltage for antennas. It makes an important difference because you'll get ringing, you'll get with an impedance mismatch, you'll get a big loss of signal. If you don't have properly balanced impedance for the antenna. For digital signals, you can get away with the wrong impedance for short runs, 4 or 5 feet, 10 feet maybe. I would not run anything over about 10 feet unless the impedance of the cable matches what the equipment is asking for, usually 75 ohm.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Courtney is exactly correct. The 75 and 50 numbers we're bounding around here is the impedance of the cable. And what that means is the maximum transfer of power will happen at the same type of impedance. In other words, if the input is 50 and the output is 50, you have the maximum amount of power being transferred. If you're mismatching them, a little bit lost, which means that's why it'll work in a short run.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Also, if you have impedance mismatch, you'll get reflections inside the cable, so you'll get ringing, what's called ringing. And in a digital signal, you probably won't see it. It might show up as some sparkles or something. In an analog signal, you'd see actual kind of echoing images slightly off center as a sign of ringing or the impedance mismatch. And remember that cables and connectors have to be matched. There's 75 ohm connectors, they're B and C connectors, and there's 50 ohm B and C connectors, and they are different.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, I've been setting up my M2 Pro Mac Mini and am interested in an entry-level webcam for Zoom meetings that still would pass Office Hours 2.5 standards. Would you recommend the Insta360 Link, or would a Logitech Brio suffice?
The Link looks a lot better. That's all I have to say. The Link looks a lot better than the Brio. And you have a lot more control over it, both in color and so on and so forth. I would definitely recommend a Link if I was getting a webcam. Next question.
Zach Phillips in Philadelphia asking, can a decimator 12G cross or 2 serve as a poor man's region of interest crop several HD frames from one 4K? Aside from the old Odyssey 7Q, which doesn't have SDI outs for this, what's an affordable way to get multiple HD shots from one 4K shot?
You could do that. You should be able to do that. So the Decimator 12G cross will allow you to have a 112G input, and I believe it will let you do it'll send out the quad, so allow you to convert that 12G input to quads. So if you had something to go in, I don't know if you can go in. That's the problem. You got to figure out how to get it to the 12G in the first place. So you'd have a 4-up of different things, and you put it into that, and it'll split it, because the way the quad works in Ultra HD is it's just, literally 4 HD signals. So if you put them in quads, it should just come out as those. We've always found it to be a little tweaky. You always end up with a line from the other quad or something else like that when we try to do this stuff. So it hasn't been 100% successful, but we have done it especially trying to transport HD frames over. We might have either some kind of transport, and we want to send 4 cameras that want to stay in sync. We'll put them into quads and then send them 4K, transport SRT, live view, all these other things. When they get to the other end, you split them back out again, and then you have them all, and they stay in sync. That's the big thing, because if you have them all in different encoders, it's hard to keep them in sync. So that's one way that we actually use them. Go ahead, Chris.
The way Zach worded the question, saying several HD frames and not 4, it made me think he was trying to artistically pull regions of interest out of the 4K frame and not just mathematical quadrants.
Yeah,
you can't do that though, right?
No, I wouldn't. you would need something else to do that. So, but yeah, if you were just trying to grab quads, you could do that. If you're trying to grab something more complicated than that, you'd need a real ROI. And those are the region of interests. There's AJA actually makes one that is designed to do exactly what you do. It's called the region, I think, ROI. So it's check that out as well. Next question.
From Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Chris asks, has anyone tried the Frameworks ID series Creator by Gator? With their crossbar setup, not exactly cheap, but seems very sturdy for a dual or triple VISA setup with camera lights and sound.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I can speak for their standard boom, which is not exactly the same device, but I can tell you that their build quality is excellent. It has a very sturdy basis. This is the Frameworks Gator that we're looking at.
Oh, so you're using that exact thing?
Not exactly, but it's made by the same company, so I can speak to their build quality.
Okay, very good, very good. Next question.
Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, loaded a local record from ATEM into Resolve. Looking at program, not ISO timeline, shows purple segments with no video. What causes this?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing we always worry about when we do these kind of records and why we record ISOs. What I would do is I would look at those purple segments. I don't know what's actually causing that, but I would look at those purple segments and see if it's the same camera. Is it the same input, or is it the same type of thing? So what was going on when you went into that? And immediately I would go back and test it and start cutting between things and doing the things that I did during the show to figure out why you have some black frames. I don't know of a great way to recover that. That's usually why we try to record at the ice. We try to record in many places as we can, to make sure if something goes wrong with our records, we have another version of it. But what I would do is look at those. Are they the same camera angle? Were you adding graphics? Was that a super source? Was that what was going on when those purple frames hit? So that's what I probably look at to see if there's some behavior that is causing those purple frames to show up. Next question.
Next question in from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Paul says, how do you manage power strips and power cords to your desk and monitor?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it depends on whether you're putting things in temporarily or permanently, whether your desk is finished in something you don't want to mar, or it's finished with something rough that you're okay to put things like brads and staples in. My favorites, most of the power strips I have, you can put 2 small screws in, and there's little holes and slots on the back where if you pop it down and then push it to the side and you get the screw with just the right clearance from the desk, that'll hold it firmly in place. If that's for a permanent installation. It requires a screw into the surface. Sometimes I don't want to do that. And in those cases, I probably will go with command strips, that 3M product that allows you to put something very well stuck on the bottom of it and then something on a desk. When you push it down, it really does lock it pretty well in place. And the advantage of the command strips is they have a little tab on them. At the end of your use case, if you pull that tab out, it will release the adhesive and let you pull it off there. So those are just 2 things. That, a lot of cable ties, a lot of zip ties, and there are a particular kind of staple gun that has a little U front on the front of it that puts a little U-shaped brad. I find if I don't have to worry about marring the finish and I'm going to do something semi-permanent, I use a lot of those kind of staples to keep the lines really clean.
Go ahead, Chris.
My desk is a disaster. I mean, it is a textbook fire hazard example. Like, don't ever let your work area look like this. I did just recently get this. it's got a whole.
Yeah,
It's got all
so many.
It's got all the ports.
It's a fire hazard all in one.
It is a my USB just went bonkers. It's actually so large I may not have a place to put it. Good tip for the screws, Bill. Take a piece of your blue painter's tape, put it across the back, poke holes where the screw holes are, peel that tape off. That's where you want to pre-drill your holes.
Nice.
Of where you're going or where you're going to put the screws in. So
Very
turn
nice.
it over, put the screws in, boom, boom, boom.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I had a problem like this because I just redid my UPS, and I wanted to make sure that all of the stuff that created the wireless Wi-Fi internet signal stayed on if the power goes off. So I started counting things up because I had a cable modem, a switch, a router, and a couple of other things that all had wall warts that had to be plugged in and had to be on the battery backup of the UPS. So I ended up taking an extension cord that has outlets on both sides of an extension cord, 3 outlets on the end of the extension cord, and I put 2 cube taps into that. This is kind of like what Fenwick ended up with. 2 cube taps, the square ones, into each side, so I could plug 6 different wall warts into the end of that. It's this thing that looks like a malignant tumor that comes off of my UPS, but it keeps them all on one input of the UPS that is always battery backed up, so I tried pulling the plug out of the wall, and my internet connection stayed on.
Good, Mitchell.
I have a wire basket that sort of holds all of my wiring, so all my AV stuff runs this way, and the power adapters I have mounted vertically so that the wires aren't running together next to each other. They're basically crossing at 90 degrees. Another tip, don't daisy chain your outlets. It's a recipe for disaster.
Next question.
Next question coming in from Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. Streamed event with 20 people in a room, 150 online. Client ignored the larger audience. Clients are ambivalent to bring the virtual audience into the room during the events, open to the public for fear of trolls on open mics and cameras. Solutions?
I don't like open mics in the room, let alone outside of the room. So I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't bring people in general, live from the online audience. That's why we use something like Makana to make those things happen, and so that people can type the questions in, you can see the questions, you can present the questions, and I think that should be done both in the room and out of the room. I was just in an event that exemplified my concerns, which is that it wasn't a horrible thing. The person just got up and talked for a long time. And I was just like, I was in the live event. This was this weekend. The person got up to ask a question and then talked for like 5 minutes and then asked a question that didn't really matter. It's exactly why we don't use open mics. And it wasn't even a troll. It was just an opinionated person that I didn't need to hear. So the thing is that I highly recommend. Again, I've worked with some pretty large organizations, and once they get used to taking questions via text, they never go back to open mics. I mean, open mics, there's like a mystique to open mics, like we can have this moment, and people are going to feel included. But generally, what it means is that you're letting someone take over your show. So I would not ever do that unless I didn't have a tool to do that. So you do, in the room, we haven't had a lot of tools. We use things like I use the phone version of Makana in-room events so that I don't have to have an open mic and let people just run off on their own. You don't want to let civilians do that. It's just not a good look. And I know there's a culture to it that you have to kind of break up. But when you move to something that's all text and you have some version of it that both the online audience and the in-room audience can have, and if they can answer the questions, ask questions, vote on the questions, all those things, it means that they're all one group. And the client doesn't have to worry about trolls because nothing's going to get promoted to the speakers that wasn't already seen, wasn't already approved, generally wasn't already voted up. So it's a much different situation. That's the easiest way to do that. But I would definitely not bring random people in. We've definitely brought lots of people into meetings, but usually they, it looks like they just came in, but we prepped them, sent them gear, and then we go, oh, we're going to go to Judy, and we were like she just showed up, and there was like 2 weeks of meetings about Judy. So usually if we bring people in, it's usually not by accident. Otherwise, you do. I mean, the bottom line is if you ignore your online audience, they're just not going to come back. And I just talked about this. If you watch my video, I'll put it up on Discord and I'll tweet it out today. But if you watch the video that I talked about, the thing is that you have to be very careful about how the online audience feels, because they don't know how they feel a lot of the time. They just know that it wasn't, the next time they're busy and the show shows up, they don't come because it just wasn't that important. And the reason it's not important is because they didn't feel like they were included or part of the event. And it's devastating to your audience, because it means that it's very hard to get them to come back, because now that's been proven to them that it's not worth it. So you have to figure out a way to get that online audience included. I would do it with text, not video. And I would do that across the board so that your in-room audience and your online audience are in the same playing field, so that they're all equal, and you have way more control. It sounds better. It's shorter. Your question velocity is way higher. Just give up on the in-room mics. They're horrible. Next question.
Mike Edwards from Brooklyn, New York, asking, morning, guys. My house of worship utilizes older Epson projectors as iMag. Would you recommend upgrading to higher-end projectors or using separate LED video wall panels instead?
Go ahead, Chris.
Mike, I'm looking at your image here, and it's a really bright room, and you got to remember the black will only be as black as what the lights are when they're off. And so I think LEDs would be better if you could do it. And given the layout of this room, it may be really interesting if you tried maybe 2 vertical screens. You'd have to think about the way you compose things, but given just the shape of the everything else in the room, 2 vertical screens might be really interesting. It's going to cause some headaches, but at least think about it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the LED wall is the way to go. I agree with Chris that because the ambient lighting in that room is so high, especially if you're conducting services during the daytime and there's a lot of windows involved, or if they just keep the ambient lighting from those chandeliers up, it's going to wash out the screens. And so to overcome that, you're going to have some very powerful projectors, which are going to get kind of almost as expensive as the LED panels. And so I'd go with the LED panels because they're going to be brighter and they're going to probably last longer. You don't have to change bulbs in them and a lot of other good reasons.
I'd be very curious to see how big an 85-inch TV looked there, because these aren't massive projections. I'm not even sure if they're that much larger than an 85-inch TV. If I had a TV that would fit in there, I'd put it in there because it's a lot less trouble. And
it actually looks 4x3, honestly.
I know it's 4x3, but I'm saying I wonder how the size. So if you did a vertical 85-inch TV, the way Chris was talking about it, be a lot brighter, a lot simpler, and a lot less trouble to just do it that way. I mean, the problem with the LED panels is that they'll be expensive. It'll be a lot more expensive than an 85-inch TV. But otherwise, I would absolutely, in what you're showing us here, use an LED panel or an LED TV or LCD TV. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana, asking, has anyone tried the portable furniture at the link below? Thinking about them for a portable stage show setup.
I did look at the link. You know why I looked at the link? Chris, do you know why I looked at the link? Do you know why? Because it was in early. It was in early, and I was able to review it. So just a quick reminder that if you put these questions in early, we can take a look at these and think about them. So get them in before 6:30 a.m. I would never use these because if I'm going to have a nice furniture, I'm going to make it look nice, and I don't know if these really look nice. I don't know why I would spend $4,000 on furniture and then have it, like that. The ROI on that seems to be very low. I could buy nicer pieces of furniture for a couple $100 at IKEA and just leave them behind. And I could do that quite a few times. So I don't know. I think that somebody thought this was a good idea, and maybe somebody uses it, but I just don't know why I would fill storage space in a truck. I mean, these are the kind of things you get when you have a truck. So when you have a big truck, throw a bunch of chairs in. We throw chairs in, but we throw lots of chairs in. We just roll them in to the back of the truck, and the first thing that comes out of the truck are 20 chairs, and they're not very expensive. They cost $150, $200 each. They're on rollers. They have high backs. They're comfy, and 20 of them come rolling out. They're usually tied together somehow so that we can kind of keep them as like a little gaggle, and they all kind of move to where our production area is and open it up. But if I was the problem is you'd say, well, this isn't those chairs. This is the chair for the VIP. I would never put a VIP in a chair in a case. Like that's what, we wouldn't definitely have good chairs for the VIPs. So I don't see how I would ever use this thing. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, unless you're doing a conference on case manufacturing
Yes.
or truck drivers, or then it would be appropriate.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it looks like cases. Otherwise, for $4,000, which is what this setup costs, you could buy some nice chairs and some nice cases to carry them around in,
Exactly,
so that they don't get damaged when they're transported.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Didn't we show one that had a kegger built into it sometime?
That hasn't.
That's
I think that
practical.
could be more useful than the chairs. Next question.
Chris Fenwick from Emeryville, California, and here on our panel. Has anyone else noticed a drop in reliability of Frame.io recently? After tweeting my problem, someone mentioned that there is a Dropbox feature that mimics some of the features of Frame.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm usually air-gapped, and the other day I connected back up to the internet, and I can't quantify this, but I can certainly tell you that there was a lot of activity on Adobe between Frame.io and the operating system. I think it was just downloading files for whatever purpose, I don't know.
I use Frame every day. I haven't seen any change. There's, I've definitely occasionally had something where it's a little slower or a little over, but I haven't seen any anomalies at all, and I was using it a lot yesterday. Go ahead, Chris.
What browser are you using, Alex?
I use Chrome. Yeah. I use the Chrome browser, or I use the transfer
transfer
utility.
app, right?
Yeah.
So literally, it would not refresh a window. I'd hit refresh, and then it would.
And are you in Chrome?
Eventually, I was in Safari.
Okay. I will say that I have had an enormous number of problems with Safari in the last 2 weeks, but I haven't. I've had all kinds of laggy, stuck, things not working well, and I have to admit it may have always been there, but I was like, I'm going to make Safari my default browser, and then after about 2 weeks, I was like, I'm going to make Chrome my default browser. Every time, it was just weird hang-ups and things.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I asked the question, because when I tweeted it, I did get some traction from around the globe, yet saying yes, that other people had seen problems. But does anybody know what this Dropbox feature is for file reviews?
No, I would never. I mean,
I'm not a fan of Dropbox either.
The only reason I still have Dropbox is because I can't figure out how to get all the files off, and they've made an enormous amount of money on the fact that I'm just having trouble downloading them all. They've made thousands of dollars on the fact that I can't figure out how to get all the files off without spending 2 weeks doing them by hand. It's just, I hate that opera. I hate Dropbox, and I still pay them. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm thinking about switching, and I have my eye on Altheon, which is a new program for Mac specifically that works really well with Final Cut. It is not as well developed. It is relatively new, but it looks like they're going to be a Frame.io solid competitor, and they have some unique features. So that's that. I'm not disappointed, and I still use Frame. But it seems like almost all the development now has moved into the subscription model, and I just don't like things that I have to subscribe to regardless. You can buy Frame.io now and not subscribe. It's a separate thing still. But I just don't think the development is at the pace that it used to be, at least with a focus for us Mac users who are in Final Cut and things like that. And Altheon looks like it's coming up with a product that's going to do very much what we used to do with Frame, but in that environment. So I'm looking at that.
And we're going to have those guys on soon, so stay tuned. Next question.
Liberty White from Toronto, Ontario. Liberty asked, as a U.S.-based business, what things do you need to pay close attention to when paying international contractors or companies? Payment tools, etc.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Keep an eye on the exchange rate because it varies. And if you agree on a price, you have to agree on whether that's U.S. dollars or whatever the dollars are of the person in the far end. I use PayPal for most of these transactions because it's easy. It does cost up to 3% for me for international payments. But they offer PayPal for Business now. It's pretty universally accepted. Almost all the e-commerce sites accept PayPal as a form of payment. So it's easy for me. That's what I use.
Yeah, the conversion rate is quite a thing. I've been bit a couple of times, but generally for whatever reason, I made a lot of money on the conversion rate because I bid everything in U.S. dollars and just say this. It's a U.S. dollar. This is what it is. I'm not going to make you change it. And so far, I've done okay. But you do have to pay attention to that rate. Especially, we've done things like around elections, and you worry because the election actually affects the strength of that currency, and so that's been more complicated as you kind of move through that. But the PayPal, direct, obviously bank transfer. You got to pay attention to where does VAT fit into what you're doing. So, are you going to have to fill out some forms that give you, exempt status or not? So VAT becomes a big deal because it's a big chunk. It can be like 18% of your bill. So, so those are things to pay attention to as well. Next question.
Tony Mobley, Noonan, Georgia, asking, I've been tasked with recording a live event for House of Worship 100 miles away from my home. I am considering using Cinemaker with iPhones and iPads as cameras. Does the panel have another suggestion for how I might be able to do this event?
Cinemaker could work really well. I think that my temptation would probably be to use, some links. I mean, what I've been doing with the Michael Krasny show and other things with graymatter.show is using an Ultra Studio with Mimo and a couple Link cameras, and I have up to 4 of them, and it all seems to work pretty well. So I'd be tempted to, that's how I would do it. Is I would show up with a computer and some Link web cameras as opposed to iPhones. I think it would be a lot. You can't put them in quite as many places, but you also probably will have less errata. Is my guess. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, would the use of a mic on a boom arm on camera in a non-broadcasted online meeting make a negative impression on the other party, like I was showboating?
You go ahead, Mitchell.
As the office hours resident showboater, and I have no taste, I think you do all that to taste. The only thing I don't like seeing are people that hold the microphones in their hands. So to answer your question, I don't think that there'd be a problem with it on a mic boom. In fact, a lot of people do it that way, and some mics don't work well as on a stand. They work better on a boom that can move around. Personally, I like my mic down and out of the sight.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I used to always do 2 mics. I'd try to do a lav on the talent, but then I would put a boom on a stand, not an operated boom, but just a stand with a menace arm on it and the boom overhead to make sure I had 2 audio sources that were really good, particularly if suddenly the mic flips around and you got scratchy for a silk tie or something like that. That boom mic saved my bacon a lot of times. People are kind of used to the behind the scenes. I wouldn't keep it visible in the regular shot, but a release shot pulling back and showing the set or something like that, people are really used to how production is done, and I don't think it looks bad at all, unless you're trying to fake people into thinking it's a very intimate one-on-one conversation with somebody emotional, and then you want to keep the equipment out of things.
Good, Courtney.
I don't know about the showboating case of how it looks. It's how it sounds is really important for for your video. I would go with a separate person handling that boom. If you attach a boom to the camera, that might be problematic, especially if it's coming out overhead, because depending if you're in an uncontrolled lighting situation, you could end up with a shadow right across the face of the person from the boom if it's not operated by you.
I think he just means that the boom would be in the camera shot. I don't know if he means that it's on the camera itself or attached to the camera itself. I think it's just
I didn't understand it as that, but
it's
mounted on camera, not appearing on camera. Generally, you don't want to have it on camera in the frame.
Yeah, obviously I don't care. so I've tried to, do as much as I can, both within the show and within meetings in general, is to make it just okay to have a mic in the frame because it just sounds better. Generally sounds better to have the mic in the frame than when it's out of the frame because it's closer to the source. And so I'm trying to I will admit that I'm trying to remove it because I just want everyone to do that so that it sounds better for me. So down the road, so I hear less of their room and less of everything else. And so I use an underslung arm. Obviously I don't care about having the mic in the frame. And I think that it once people get used to it, it doesn't really matter. If it matters a lot of times with this mic that you see here, I use a black shirt, and you know what happens? You almost never see it. A black shirt, this black mic on a black shirt. I have another shirt that looks exactly like this one, except it's black. And if I go into meetings, oftentimes I wear it specifically because the mic just it's not that I'm hiding it, but it just kind of disappears into the thing, and no one really thinks about it. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Since you're saying online, I'm assuming it's a podcast or something like that. Podcasts traditionally like to have their mic into shot because podcasting started out audio only. So then it made the transition into video, and the mics seem to have stayed. So I think it says something, too. It says that this is the podcast.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, that radio standard of people having a mic and thing, even from the Larry King Dales and all the rest of it. And that's exactly why I wear black T-shirts. There's my mic sitting right there, and it's gone. Now you see it, now you don't.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
And I want to point out that I have the same microphone as Alex does, and it's out of the frame, and I think it sounds just as good because it's not quite. I think it's almost it's within that close, that distance to me.
The challenge is that you're a little large in frame. I bet you're not quite in the Fenwick frame, and so what I've noticed is that I have to be if I am at that distance, I have to pull it back in to get the performance that I want. Next question.
And it's from Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. Andy says, I'm expecting my M2 Pro MacBook soon. Are there any gotchas folks have come across with video operations? Thanks.
I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any issues with the M2. I have an M2 Mac Mini. I don't have the M2 Pro MacBook so far. But so far, everything's acted the way I expected it to. So far, so good. So we'll see how it goes. Let us know. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, for the Super Bowl, Game Creek Video transcoded the ST2110 signals to and from SDI because SDI is a common gateway. All users can use it, and it improves IT security. Wouldn't cat cabling be much easier than coax, and what security issues would there be?
I don't know why I raised my hand. I go back and forth with being a panelist now. Yeah, it's still more secure because it just can't carry a lot of information. There's not a lot to do on an SDI other than the video. And 2110 is still kind of a newer thing. And again, as a common gateway, it's just easier to get things in and out of that system. Next question.
Next question coming in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The advanced video sharing feature was used by Playout Video in a Zoom meeting. Meeting was recorded via the cloud option, and this recording exhibits audio sync issues not noticed in the live meeting. Known issue? Potential recording format issue?
We've seen this before in specifically in screen. I've not done I have to admit that I never play video out through the screen sharing. I know that the advanced screen sharing can do that. It's just that we don't do it very often, and because it's just wonky, and we usually have, if I'm doing that, I have a switcher or some kind of switching software that I'm going to use for playback. That generally, so I'm going to cut in because I want to be able to cut in and out, and the process of screen sharing is cumbersome. So I don't have a lot of experience in actually doing that, but I can tell you that we see sync issues in records when we do screen cap, when we do anything that has video that has to be synced, and we do any kind of screen sharing, we see sync issues. And I think that's early on why. And the reason I don't have any recent experience is because like 2 years ago I wrote off the idea of screen sharing videos, and so the idea of screen sharing videos is not something that is common within our production pipeline anymore because it was so bad before. They may have made improvements, but I would never do that. In a real event. I would, so it was a known issue a long time ago. I don't know if it's improved or gotten worse, but we stopped doing it a long time ago because it was, we always cut it into a standard video input, and we found that we didn't have any sync issues in the record. The other problem that screen share has in general is if you don't get it just right, it throws off all the resolution of all of your sources. And so if you're doing a record and you put a screen capture in, it's not exactly 1080, 1080p, you're going to end up in some kind of weird format that Zoom does. The screen, I would only use Zoom records as a last resort, to do anything. Go ahead, Bill.
It's just a weird thing, but every time I see audio sync issues, I always think of sample rates. I'm not saying that's what's going on here, but it's weird because I now have one client who's an ongoing client who asked me to deliver work to them, voiceover work specifically, in 44.1. I have not flipped a switch in my software from 48 kilohertz to 44.1 in probably 15 years. And now I find myself having to go back and forth, and it's driving me a little nuts. So I always just think if I have any kind of drift or if I have any kind of audio sync that is not fixed over time, I always look at sample rate because about 90% of the time, that's what it turns out to be. I'm not saying it is in this case at all or that Zoom's not handling that right. I'm just saying that's been my experience.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael again. Would there be a desktop stand for the Logitech Blue Sona mic that would still give acceptable audio quality given the mic's super cardioid pattern?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I wouldn't use a desktop. I would find a way to, I would find a way to connect that to something else if you can. If there's any way that you can not have your mic connected to your desk or have it, an arm is better. But like what I have, so I have this arm that holds this mic. It's actually connected to a different table, not my main table. And the reason I do that is so that if I tap my table or I do something, that vibration doesn't transfer itself into the mic. So I even with a shock mount, I prefer to just not have it because you can still, if I hit, you can still hear that even with a shock mount. And so I prefer to have it connected to another table that I have next to me. And so that's something that I would strongly consider doing, is to have a low profile arm that's connected to something next to you. And by the way, as we go through it, we'll probably start the graphics early unless you have other questions. We are just ripping through these questions. So if you have questions about the graphics or not general questions, go ahead and throw them in right now. Otherwise, we'll probably start the Super Bowl coverage early. All right, go ahead, Mitchell.
I agree with what Alex was saying about the stand. There's very little information out there in the wild about that particular microphone. I know none of our people have had one to try out. The question is whether or not the mic is made with internal shock mount capability. If it's not good in that area, if you can handle it and it makes noise, it's not going to work well on a desk.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, 100% agree with all of that. I have in the past when I've absolutely been forced to use a desk mount mics, and in sports coverage and things like that, I've had to do that a few times for stadium announcing. I used to carry 2 or 3 of the really thick mouse pads with me and try to use that. It's actually skin diver suit material as a temporary vibration stopper. And it's okay if you have to use them, but everybody has said it. Anything that's direct couple, anytime you put your coffee cup down or something like that, you'll be likely to hear it if it's a sensitive mic.
Go ahead, Courtney.
You can also put the high-pass filter on or the low-frequency roll-off everything below 50 hertz, and that'll stop a lot of that boom arm boominess if you tap on stuff. But it does take a little of the bass end out of your lovely bass voice.
Go ahead. Next question.
Next question in from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. What is the best way to keep your setup area clean? You don't want to use compressed air.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Just make sure it only has vertical surfaces. That's pretty hard to do. Nothing collects on it because gravity takes care of that for you.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I agree. Compressed air can be a problem because it just blows it around. Here's what I use. I have this cute little brush that I can use to brush things, and it's very, very soft, so it's not going to change any of the settings on my ATEM or rack-mounted gear if I decide to wipe it down. It just moves the dust somewhere else, so you got to be prepared to get it off the floor or somewhere else by doing the regular vacuuming.
Go ahead, Bill.
And at Trader Joe's, they have this sandalwood cleaner that it comes in a big light blue bottle. A very fine mist of that and a very big lint-free cloth is my clean up my desk of choice thing. I like that stuff. I think it smells nice too, but it's not very toxic for anything.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to see if I can find it fast enough. I use a kind of a cleanup gel, and I'm just trying to. I was trying to look through my Amazon orders. It comes in a little bottle, and what it does is it's called. It's a keyboard. It's actually called keyboard cleaner. And so 4-pack keyboard dust cleaning gel. So just do a search for dust cleaning gel. It looks gross. I will tell you. You pull it out of you unscrew it, and you pull it out of this little container, and it's just kind of goo. And then you put it on anything that you want to clean that has lots of little buttons and everything else. It doesn't get into the buttons. It just gets into all the dust, and it just pulls it all up. And it instead of pushing it around. Now I use a small vacuum cleaner. You can get these little keyboard vacuum cleaners and everything else. So for things that are surfaces, obviously that I have to wipe, I wipe. Things that have a lot of dust and little crevices, I find this gel works really well. And you just got to push it in there. It just kind of absorbs all of that, and you peel it off, and it just pulls everything with it without doing any damage. And so I haven't found it to do any major problems with my electronics, but it's a great way to clean things that have lots of crevices. Otherwise, that's a non-purpose cleaner. Oh, that's what.
Yeah, it's not sandalwood. It's cedarwood and sage. That's the stuff I use. It seems to do really well.
Yeah, so anyway, so that's how I clean off nooks and crannies. But otherwise, I use a vacuum or a cloth.
That goo works great on iPhones.
The goo works great on lots of things. Like I find that if there's things like I use it in my car to get into things that I can't get to, you just kind of push it into something, you pull it out, and you use it a couple times, and then you can actually use it more often than you think before you have to throw it away. It just kind of absorbs everything out. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana, asking, looking for a low-cost on-camera monitor with focus assist, mounting it onto a JVC GY-HD 250 HDV camera with a 16x lens.
I will admit most of my experiences with the Blackmagic cameras, which all the ones that I've used have focus assist on them. So I don't know. That might be more price than you want to spend. I believe that some of the Lilliputs, as well as the Feel Worlds, have focus assist on them as well. So those are less expensive monitors that may do what you want. And I believe that the Lilliputs, I know some of them have it, but I don't know if they might start getting to the same price as the Blackmagic. So Lilliput started very inexpensive and started working their way up the food chain. So, but Feel World is the new, less expensive version of that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry, I was caught typing. Small HD makes some pretty good small monitors that have focus assist on them too. They're designed for camera systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Mitchell?
Yeah, this one I'm using right here is made by Andy Cine, and if it looks like a Feel World, it is because it is a Feel World. So there's a bunch of them around there.
Go ahead, Bill.
And if you want to step up, the other big player in this space is Marshall. Marshall has a lot of focus assist capable monitors. They tend to be expensive. They use really good panels, and they have a lot of overlays for a lot of scopes and things like that. So you're probably talking twice the price of some of these other ones, but they're very good.
Next question.
From Tony Mobley, I'm part of a Mid-Journey Discord. Whoa, sorry about that. I'm part of a Mid-Journey Discord.
Mid-Journey. It's not a. there's one.
Of the Mid-Journey Discord. Sorry, I was distracted. But I do not know how to give access and use it. Can you please give a novice explanation of how to use Mid-Journey?
Yeah, so the main thing with Mid-Journey is that you, I'm not going to open it because it opens up all my Discord. But basically, if you go into Mid-Journey, into the general area, you're going to see newbies. First of all, there's a read this or for beginners at the very beginning, and you want to read those instructions. But the first thing you're going to end up doing, actually what I would do first is scroll down, and you'll see things that are more about verticals. And so you may see image for the day and different challenges that are going on lower down in Mid-Journey. And what you want to do is go down there and look at it and watch what people are putting in. So start to look at the search terms. Don't start typing stuff into the newbie area until you've watched what other people are doing and start going, oh, I see what's happening there. You might want to write down a couple of the terms that make sense. Oh, I see what, and some of them, some people put a lot of garbage in there. I don't think it makes any difference. It's kind of like there's a lot of superstition, that goes on in the thing. Like, I'm going to put in 8K and I'm going to put in, but there are things like glam lighting definitely affects your image, but 8K, I'm not so sure. So you put these images, you put the stuff in, and but what you want to do is look at what other people are doing throughout that process and start to take notes of those things. Then you go up into the newbie sections. You can jump into those newbie sections and you can type in a search term. And the way you type in a search term is you go up there and you go /imagine. And then you put in your search terms. Now, if you want it to be 16:9 at the end, you might go --AR space 16:9. If you want to change it, otherwise you're going to get a 1x1, which is fine for when you're getting tested, when you're testing and learning how to do it. So you can go into the newbie section and you get, I think, 25 of those that you can do. And so you can sign up there. Not sign up there, but you can test those. But test slowly. Do a couple things. And then go look at what other people are doing, do a couple more, and go look at what people are doing, rather than just trying to just go off the top of your head and try to figure it out, because you're going to burn up the credits that you have for free. And so you want to watch a little bit, learn a little bit, ask questions, and use a couple search terms. After that, you can get the base version. I think is $15 a month if you want to give it a shot, where you have a little bit more server time and you can kind of experiment. The thing to remember is that if you get the base version that you're paying for, you can do /relax, and that's not going to count against your server time. So /fast counts against your server time, /relax doesn't. So if you're willing to go slower, you can learn a lot. That's what I started with. I started with relax, and I just let it go over a long period of time. And then I can figure this all out. And what happens is once you've signed up for it and you pay your $15, it shows up as it's like a Mid-Journey person. Like there's like all the people that you see in Discord, all the directs that you have, there's just a Mid-Journey one. And now you can just, when you're talking to that Mid-Journey one, you're asking it. So, and you can decide whether there's two different ways of using it. You can pay a little extra and have it be private. So all your stuff is only yours. When you get the base one, the $15 one, everything you do is going to be public. It's going to all be shown, into the feeds. And so you just have to know that that's how that system works. But I will say it's a lot of fun. And I have gone from not knowing what Mid-Journey was to using it every day for illustrations and oftentimes just entertainment. If you really want to create a crazy feedback loop, you go into Mid-Journey and you go into ChatGPT and have it describe something to you, like describe a castle to a 5-year-old, and then it'll give you this description and then cut and paste that into Mid-Journey. See what it comes up with. So now you have kind of a circular access. Go ahead, Courtney.
And you can go on YouTube. I found a good channel for creating prompts by a guy named Christian Hydorn. He has a YouTube channel here, and his most recent one is on using negative tokens and so on, because there's an entire hierarchy in how to craft your prompts. There are secret sauce. There's certain type of punctuation that creates, values you can add or remove. You can remove things, add things, emphasize things more than other things. Once you know the language of the prompts that it looks at and the tokens that Mid-Journey uses out of those prompts. And so you can find some good tutorials online on YouTube. Just take a look there.
Yeah, and we're probably going to cover AI in some ways. Mid-Journey probably pretty often, at least once a month, just because it's growing so fast and it's so important to what we do. And so stay tuned for more. Mid-Journey second hour is probably a couple weeks away. Next question.
Next question in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. Josh asks, how many revisions is common to include in the base price of a deliverable for a client? What methods may potentially negate the need for excessive revision request, and how principles to set pricing for extra revisions or scope creep?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Generally, it's like 3. I mean, always a mezzanine level recording that could be transcoded to anything. Almost always a YouTube or social media version, and sometimes broadcast.
I think he's looking at revisions as opposed to versions. So how many times someone asks for change?
My apologies, I completely misread that question.
Yeah, good, Bill.
Well, I think it depends. All of these things are relationships. So what is your relationship with the person on the other end? Not the client necessarily, but whoever you're working with on that side of things. And for me, I'm a little more flexible in the early days of working with a client because I want them to see me as being somebody who's flexible. But I listen for those times when they don't know what they're looking for, and it's the kind of client that can put me through endless revisions for no good reason just because they can't make up their mind. That is death in these kind of relationships. You need to have a professional relationship where they know there's a limit to what they can ask. If suddenly they say, I want to triple everything, can you do it at the same price? You got to make that note and go, this may not be somebody I want to work with for the long run.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of times we look at the revisions. 3 is usually typical, and in a lot of our contracts we have 3 non-recursive set of changes. Non-recursive means you can't change something the first time and then change it again the next time. Like change it back or anything. If you didn't ask for it in the first revision, asking for it in the second revision, asking for something new, like what we want to do is change the things that we changed. So what it tries to do is force people to really think about it in the first revision. Now, I will say for larger clients and larger budgets, we don't do that. We just there's a dance back and forth. We're going to show them something, they're going to send it back. We're going to show them something, they're going to send it back. We're going to show them something, they're going to send it back. And we don't And we usually bid into it that we have, the hours to do that, and so what you're looking for is the number of editing, the amount of editing time required to have a lot of back and forth with the client. It's a lot less stressful for them. If you start nickel and diming them every time they make a change, you're creating a stressful event and they probably won't come back. So we do everything we can to kind of account for what the client may do. If a client is unreasonable, I have to admit that I would love to say that there's a bunch of ways to doing this, but I usually just don't get that client again. And so we do the best we can to kind of manage that. If they're asking for additional assets, then usually we're charging for, I need a new 3D asset. Well, that's going to cost money. I need a new graphic asset. Well, we have to hire someone to do that. But if they're asking for back and forths of editing or back and forths of making those things, those are kind of things that you hope to account for. And sometimes you just have to have experience. A lot of times, we joke that you take what you think it's going to do and then you multiply it. You double that, and then before you put the bid in, you double it again. so you have 4 times as much in there as you think you need. It's better to come back to the client at the end and say, "Hey, we didn't use all that editing time, and I'm going to give you back this much money," than it is to come back to them and ask for more money because they made a bunch of changes. Like it's just not a great way to experience for their experience. And so I do everything I can to avoid revision charges. Because we try to calculate that into the initial budget. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, I'm monitoring the performance statistics from AziTop as I install all my virtual instruments on my M2 Pro Mac Mini, and the OS has already started to use swap, 0.3 and 1 gigabyte, even with only 18 gigabytes of 32 gigabyte RAM in use. How could that be?
On a Mac, you should just pay attention to the end performance. You shouldn't worry about how it's managing the memory and everything else, because if you're managing that, you're going to be worried about something that may or may not matter. It's going to do what it thinks it can do, correctly and to the highest performance. So it'll start to do whatever it feels like it needs to do. Now, if you're seeing delays and hiccups and so on and so forth, that's another thing. But if you're just trying to look at the raw performance, it is using such an amalgamation of drive and GPU and CPU that you're not going to know what that actually means to what it's doing. It's probably taking some smaller assets from the system and just putting them over there because it's like, well, I don't need to keep these in active memory, and so I'm just going to protect those. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, exactly what Alex says. Back in the early days, they built into the silicon that Apple was making, even before the new stuff, a function called Grand Central Dispatch that takes in commands going into the processor and manages them incredibly efficiently. That's one of the reasons that the performance can be so high inside these Mac systems. And so I don't even think about that stuff anymore. Alex is exactly right. If you are losing real world performance on the back end, then you can go upstream and try to figure it out. But trying to figure out in advance in this sophisticated system, I just don't think there's anything you can do to affect it and make it better.
Yeah, go ahead. Next question.
From Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota, where would be a good place to learn more about LED panel construction?
I have to admit, I kind of want to bring the guys from View back into the
that was
just
a
for a second hour,
wow.
Second hour on panel construction, if they're willing to, what to order and what to think about. I think there's a whole second hour on just LED construction that would be really interesting to see if they're willing to share their knowledge with us related to that. But it was fascinating. If you didn't see our second hour yesterday, what a great hour. Like, it was just a really, really great second hour of it's inspiring in the sense that they got themselves into a pickle as a lot of companies did during COVID, and they just muscled their way out and thought quickly and made the turn, and now have a thriving business related to LED walls and so on and so forth. And so I think that's a real, really interesting. It was really interesting as far as their business, but it's also, we got into some of the tech with them, but I would love to dig further into it. So we'll see if we can get them back for a second hour or a lab where we can, talk through some of those things. I think that's the only place I know. It's not written anywhere. I think they just figured it out by ordering a bunch of panels and cobbling together some bits and pieces and figuring it out. So it'd be really good to try to bring them back. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, Mitchell, what did you mean by a social media version of a project? I've seen plenty of YouTube content that can hold its own with the paid streaming services.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm actually referring to YouTube as one of the main culprits here. H264 or 265, generally what they use. There are a number of other smaller, different, like Facebook, which are close but not quite the same. So start out with a good mezzanine format and then transcode that as you need it for everything else, including YouTube.
Yeah, it's a lot of times when you're building these, it's also all kinds of aspect ratios. And so you may have a shorts version, a 16:9 version, an Instagram version, which will be 1:1, 4K version. There's all kinds of things that you may, when you put these out, and you're also like, even though you're 9:16 on TikTok and on YouTube Shorts, the debris that shows up from the app is in different places. So you might have to move that debris around to the screen debris to make your stuff look right. So those are all challenges. Go ahead, Bill.
Exactly what you're saying. Now, I work with a lot of art directors, and they have multiple deliverables, and even some of the things you think, like, I see a lot of square format, or I see a lot of tall format in my Facebook feed or my Instagram feed. Often they will take a 16:9 and then do something in terms of an eye catcher above it and a call to action below it with a click space. So just every service you're heading toward at the top end of professional is looked at in terms of how can I maximize the amount of space that I am purchasing so that I can do the maximum job of attracting eyeballs and getting clicks if that's the client's desire.
Yep. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's also interesting. I do a lot of corporate work, pharmaceutical work, and it's almost always YouTube. But recently I've been doing some work from Hollywood, and it's unbelievable the versions of programs that they want, to Alex's point, all kinds of aspect ratios.
Yeah, and when you think about the versions of things that go out, oftentimes once you start to talk about film distribution and all the other bits and pieces, sometimes something can be produced hundreds of times. If you think about all the captions, all the dubbing, all the, there are so many versions of something that has to go out, and this is where these big pipelines get built, where you build this very complex nodal, like I'm going to put out all these outputs. Telestream makes a lot of these bigger tools, but there's a lot of other companies that make them as well that process it all. You drop it in, and it's going to push out huge numbers, and then you have to quality control all that. so it's like, somebody's sitting there having to watch a lot of it to make sure that it comes out, especially for a large event or a large product. It's going to go through a lot of QC before it goes out, and so it's really much more complicated than it sounds. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's easy when I'm doing stuff in After Effects. It's easy to create multiple aspect ratios, but invariably, in every case, you have to move logos around and text in order to fit that particular version, and that's where the real work gets done.
Yeah, one of the things I've been thinking about for doing stuff in Final Cut is actually building I was going to talk to Alex Goldner about this actually, but building a plugin for InMotion that has different items like text and everything else in different places, and be able to have a switch that says, I'm doing this for Shorts, I'm doing this for TikTok, and it would just move all the stuff over to where it needed to be based on whatever switch I kind of went back and forth on. And the cool thing there is that you could hit render and then flip the switch and hit render again, and it would just do the same thing. It would output it. You were going to say something, Bill?
Yeah, you should. I have a friend, Charlie Austin, who worked at a trailer house in Los Angeles, and the number of versions he had to kick out was unbelievable. What he figured out was a way in Final Cut to use rolls to actually change the slates on the front of all the different versions, and then an automated system of punching it all out. It took him like a week or something like that to get them all set up, but once he did, he could run 50 different versions with the punch of a button. It was really a fascinating thing. Charlie may be around somewhere. I may be able to get him on the show.
That'd be great. It'd be fun to have him on. Yeah, it's funny when you get a little downtime, spending that time trying to figure out how to automate something that you have been working on. When I was in print, one of the big problems that we had was that I was based in Denver, and I want to do an ad in St. Louis. I did print ads for Prime Sports Network, and so I want to run a print ad there. And what I would do is you'd build the print ad in Quark. You'd load all the images in from Photoshop or whatever. You package it up and put it on a 14.4 baud modem. And it would send it for an hour and a half. A little print ad would take like an hour and a half to get to. And what I realized while I was doing this, and I was 22 years old or something like that, and getting paid $7.50 an hour. Anyway, but I realized that all the time was moving the images, all the time was moving the stills. And so what I did is I worked with all the service bureaus in my entire region, the mountain region, and I worked with them to load up. I had this huge library of images that I corrected and built up, and I put them in storage in all the service bureaus. And no one had ever done that before, so they thought I was a little nuts. And but then I could just send a Quark file. They just referenced those images. And so as long as they put them in the same folder and opened it up, it would just grab those images. And so I could do all the design of the, I could do the design. And as long as I didn't step out of those images, and I had hundreds of them, as long as I didn't step out of those images, I could always just send the ads everywhere. And I could send it at 10 o'clock in the morning to be printed in the evening newspaper. And it was funny when the ad agency showed up after that, because then I was suddenly, and then everyone got used to it. Everything went from, oh, we need this the day before, to everyone just got used to be telling me at 9 o'clock in the morning where they wanted ads, and it would all be there in the evening. And when I left, they had to go back to the ad agency, and she was a little overwhelmed. Like, they didn't quite understand how that worked. But I saved so much time, doing that. But it just sat, I had downtime, and I filled it with efficiency methods. And that's what you always want to try to think about, is you write down things or you note things that are taking a long time. And when you get a little bit of time to work on them, you cut those out. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
As an aside, the first thing I learned with dealing with our friends in Hollywood is that they're not interested in your art directing movement of logos and things like that. It's all been decided by rooms full of people and then more rooms full of people. So it was kind of interesting getting used to that cultural difference in aspects and where you place things. I know that logo really wants to go up there, but nope, they want it right here.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about pay grade. Where I work, just if they ask for input of where do you think it would be, there's lots of opinions that I have. But if they don't ask, they do a lot of times. They're like, I don't know, because I work on a lot of things that no one ever has done before, so they don't have any strong opinion about it. And so they go, where should this go? And I go, here it is. But otherwise, we don't ask any questions. We don't make any comments. We don't say, oh, that didn't really work, or that this would be better if it went somewhere other way. We're just like, how high? Like, if they say they want it, they're like, what color red do you want? Sure, got it. So anyway, that's the best way to kind of move.
Yeah, it was funny because the people I've been working with say, you work in corporate, don't you? And I'm like, yes.
Yeah. So, which is way easier in my opinion. Anyway, so that's a whole other story. I mostly, just as an aside, I mostly prefer corporate. I'm happy to work in Hollywood when I do, but corporate's a lot. It's more pay, less trouble. So anyway, all right. Next question. Not next question, but we're jumping subjects. So we are now going to talk a little about the Super Bowl. Generally, the Super Bowl graphics are something that is a big deal. The Super Bowl, for those watching who don't watch the Super Bowl, is probably the most viewed thing every year at this point. When someone posted something about this last year's Super Bowl compared to like the final episode of MASH and the final episode of whatever, and it's every year it's producing roughly 100 million viewers at the same time. There's nothing that comes close to that these days. So it is, so there's, everything else sits in the 20 million and below generally. And most things are just slowly fading away, and the Super Bowl keeps on getting bigger. So that's the reason people pay a lot of attention to it, is because it's a big live event that happens in a very short period of time, and so a lot of people are watching. I think the only thing that really competes with the Super Bowl is FIFA. So the World Cup, I think, is bigger actually than the Super Bowl. But I think that's the only thing that I know of that really gets that kind of that level. So. Oftentimes we like to pay attention to it. Last year, I think we did a whole watch party with it, but we just captured some of the pieces of it. This time I did upgrade to 4K. It looked good for YouTube TV. I jumped into the upgrade for YouTube TV so that I could see it clearer. Fox, they only put up 720p in the regular version. A lot of other ones are all 1080p. Fox is like 720p, and then you can pay for the 4K, but there's no 1080p available. So you either had to watch it, and I guess it's a good business model. It's a little frustrating. Anyway, but my computer went to sleep here. Sorry. So we'll take a look at these graphics. If you have comments or questions about the graphics that we look at, if you don't have any comments or questions, then we'll this will be a real short second hour. But we have the graphics. If people want to bring up we can discuss some of the commercials. I don't have all the commercials queued up. I just have the graphics, but we can talk about some of them. I do have a little bit of the Rihanna thing that we can kind of show as well to talk through those things. So yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, overall, I would say that Fox generally has kind of a different approach to doing graphics. They're not as sparkly and impressive as some of the regular networks. And I thought that they were kind of plain. They did some neat things with 3D objects that were pinned and moved in the perspective.
Yeah, we'll show those.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, the AR stuff is stuff that, is starting to kind of, be used. And we'll talk about what worked about that and what didn't work about that, which is, I think, when I watched it, most of it worked really well. But there was a certain part of it that I'll show that I was a little, as someone who does graphics, was a little like, oh, someone's going to have a meeting about that. so anyway, we'll take a look at that. We'll jump to this here real quick. Let me jump into. So here is here's the base. This is the first graphic that we saw here, and overall, I think it's nice. As Mitchell said, I think that Fox doesn't really try to necessarily show off, so to speak. It's kind of. Sorry, I'm looking for my pen. I misplaced my pen. Oh, there it is. One thing you want to do, and I would highlight, because it doesn't, so you can see this here, and the thing to look at is like little gradients here they definitely add things, and little highlights here. You'll see this little, these little details that don't seem like they're important do add some production value to what's going on. And I would highly recommend, I do this all the time. The reason that I have YouTube TV at all is so that I can do what I'm doing right now, is that I want to break down a show and I want to look at it and figure out what's working, not working. But I will tell you that this is how I got my first graphics work on television, was that I took graphics specifically from Fox and I recreated them. Pixel for pixel, I recreated what they were doing. And I didn't necessarily use that in my demo reel, but if you will learn a lot if you get to a point where you can do what you see in these graphics. When you look at them, they don't look that simple, but I promise you that if you haven't done graphics, just this lower third here, that would probably take you a week. It would take me a couple days to get it just right. It's much more complicated than it looks. And so you want to, and that's not counting the design there. I'm not a big fan of this little gradient down here. For some reason it popped out for me, but that's a whole nother thing. So you can see it here. And this is, so here's another one here. And one of the things you want to look at is you want to look at what are they continuing to use. There's elements that are part of the look that are there. Some things for me, because these are automatic, they're being generated dynamically. Some things that bother me is when this text gets a little too close to the edge. Text close to the edge, especially when there's plenty of room over here. I know that it's because it's an automatically generated, but it felt like this side was a little crowded as from this side here to make that actually work. But we have to also remember that all of this stuff is being generated in real time. So this isn't something someone did in After Effects. I mean, they might have designed it in After Effects, but those elements are being delivered to a real-time graphics engine, and so they're all kind of placed as a set of rules as opposed to something else there. So you'll see that's there. One thing to look at here is even stuff like this. You'll see these lines were designed, and they're very, very subtle in there, and then they kind of clear it out in the center. And you really want to look at how that kind of focuses your eye towards the center as you kind of go through that as well. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, it's interesting that they've left justified the left side type and center justified the stuff to the right of it. I know, having dealt with expanding and contracting pieces that you're going to put into something automated, it's really hard to make those choices, because whichever choice you make, you find a different piece of graphics that comes in and you wish you'd made the other choice.
Well, and I think
it's interesting.
I think one of the reasons that they did that most likely is because it protects this area. If you center it and you get it'll stick out
right
here.
Yeah.
And then you probably said, we're gonna justify it here, and we have this many characters to go out, or don't go. They probably looked at all the options, and there's probably something that goes this long on this graphic, and so for them to make that decision, because I think that if So there's probably another element that uses, not something else that uses this element that is probably ends right about here.
Well, and they've centered the weather word and the State Farm Arena long thing. So I think that's why they're pulling the centering rather than moving that 76 over so that both the elements and the lower thing are left justified. And these are the kind of things that art directors fret over all the time and make calls about.
And again, I think that this is partially, it's designed to work with a bunch of different text, and it doesn't work perfectly for any of them. You were going to say something, Courtney?
Yeah, I was going to say, since that's specifically the weather bug, the text on the left is going to be fixed. It's always going to be temp and forecast, but the stuff on the right is going to be variable at game time. It could be partly cloudy or
right. Yeah, you're right.
Instead of clear.
This is the thing that could be.
The stuff on the right is going to be changing. The stuff on the left isn't.
Right. And if this is only the weather thing, a lot of times this graphic is weather is what it's saying right now, but it could have been, a lot of different things.
And also the asymmetrical framing drives me a little bit nuts with the corner torn off or turned up.
It doesn't bother me until the text gets too close to it, and then it bothers me a lot.
So, what are the three little pips at the bottom, and then that little angled thing up? I guess it's just a design element, but that's interesting.
Yeah, and you'll notice also when we play it, you'll notice that those lines are kind of moving underneath. They're kind of moving underneath something there. So they're alphaed out. So you see how they're kind of fading out as they move. So there's a little bit of movement in there as well. So we'll kind of, again, you want to look at how, usually these aren't just simple wipes. So you'll see how this is animated out. So these are popping out like this. And then this is going to rise up out of that. And as it's doing that, these are spinning inside of that space. And then you'll see the other part open there. So it seems when you watch it at speed, it just seems kind of fun, that you're doing that. But the thing to do with a lot of these graphics is to really look at how, like what are they actually doing? And this is just a good example of it. But I would highly recommend, looking at that stuff. I don't think that's a great look right there with those, the way that those zeros popped out. There's like a little alpha channel there that isn't perfect. Anyway, but otherwise, it's, and then here it's showing you who's got the ball, and a lot of those things, like it's not just a line. You can see it's got a line, but there's also a gradient that's kind of going down, like a light that's like kind of a reflection that's kind of coming down over this as it goes through. And those are all the little things you want to try to pay attention to. See how when it turns on, see how it just kind of it comes on there, and it blinks a little bit. And it blinking like that is designed to gather your eye. Your eye will see movement. So if you'll be more likely to look down and see it and note it for a second. If it just blinks a little bit or it just moves. And a lot of times movement is designed to bring your eye to it, and then it stays stationary to have you only need it after that when you need it. So you don't want to distract people all the time. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
What's interesting about both graphics you've shown is that they don't really look like three-dimensional graphics in that they were designed in 3D software. They look more like layered to look like 3D, so they can have all these different effects going on.
Yeah, and it is interesting. A lot of the stuff. I mean, it's 3D here, obviously in the logos, but it does feel like it's a very 2D-ish. Doesn't feel as 3D as some of the other networks. As far as how that goes. Even
on the zero and the red, very subtle outline of the zero on the left when it pops up, and I assume that there's a little blue one on the right. I mean, that's the level of attention to detail they're going through.
And here you can see some of the changes there. Again, these little animations, you're going to open that up and bring in the what their position is. And again, remember that these aren't done these are all done live. So that data is being driven in live into the system automatically. And then here we have, this is this is obviously a 3D render that you can see here of this ring. And so it spins in, spins down, and then they used it as a little highlight there. I thought this was nice. I felt like the ring, I admit, I felt like this roll in was a little garish. Like I wasn't as excited about the ring there, but when they brought it down to use it that way, I thought it looked kind of nice. Couple things that they've moved away from here that I noticed is that it's more of a cartoon, and this is something that we've seen Fox do for a little while. It is a cartoon of rendering of the person, as well as not moving, so it's not green screen. A lot of things that have been being used by other platforms have been having the person sitting there, standing there, doing something, and they're going back to this. I actually prefer the cartoon over the live person. It always looks a little uncomfortable. It's like, what do I do here? And so I find that to be nice. One thing to look at is how many little light beams that they, little lens flares that they added to it. And you can see that a lot as it, as it kind of spins up. They have a lot of, you have lens flare, lens flare, lens flare, lens flare.
The nice thing about the cartoony look too is it doesn't compete with the live video underneath it.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times the green screen wasn't done very well that most people use. So I was oftentimes not that impressed with what I was looking at. There. So I think this actually works pretty well. What's interesting also is that it is in contrast, they don't show all the players, so they don't do that player lineup. All they did with the quarterbacks, which is a little bit of a bummer for the linemen. It's the only time you get to see who they are. But I think that is that was something that I thought they spent all their time on this. This gives them a lot more control too. I think it's a pretty stressful event to put all those names up and have to announce them because you have very little time to get that done. Let's jump to some of the questions or comments.
First question in from Douglas Carmichael asking, Alex, what sort of real-time graphics engines are you referring to? I've heard the name vizrt used a lot and saw their logo on Jeff's screen during office hours space.
Yeah, vizrt is a pretty common one to be used. Chiron is another one. Expressions from Ross is another one. So these are all different graphics engines that are used for these systems. And I think we're going to get some folks from Ross on relatively soon. And we'll probably bring some of the other folks on as well. So that's but those are the ones that are pretty common for these, and a lot of times they're used in conjunction. So you might have Ross doing the AR, vizrt doing some other part of the graphics, and the lower thirds being done by the Chiron. So it doesn't have to be one thing that's doing those either. Those are all feeding in key fills independently into that system. Next question.
Another one from Douglas asking, a TV technology article mentioned the Game Creek PrimeOne unit used for the Super Bowl studio show was originally built for Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime Video. How would they have de-Amazoned the truck? New graphics in the servers?
I don't think they need to de-Amazon it. I mean, the graphics are, usually come on a thumb drive. So like this is what we're using for today. The trucks are pretty, it probably means that the truck was 4K. And so that makes it a little bit simpler to make that happen, because I think the Amazon trucks are 4K, I believe. But I don't think they had to de-Amazon anything to make it probably work. It was just built for that, and then they moved it over. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I noticed on the PrimeOne trucks doing the pre-game show, they were all out of sync.
On what?
Their lips were out of sync in the beginning.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Slight.
Yeah, they were complaining online. If you're watching the chat at the time, they had a definite problem, and everyone was seeing it with lip sync in the pregame show with that truck.
I have to admit, it's probably not the truck that caused the lip sync issue, but those are things. Delay is a constant problem. And how much it delays, and I assume the audio was ahead of the video. So my guess is, if the audio was a lot ahead of the video, the real challenge is that coming from the pregame, what probably happened is it got into a route that wasn't delayed. Just the audio wasn't delayed.
Also, they had two different locations because they had their booth that was on the field, and they had their booth that was outside the stadium on the parking lot. So it could be a venue. From each venue had a different path, and that was.
And they could have been, again. It probably meant that somehow the audio and video were just passed straight through without, or that they were passed separately, which would be worse. And that would drop it out of sync. So yeah, I think that it probably just meant that an audio path didn't. There are so many, 1,000 audio paths, and a couple got through, one show. And I'm sure there'll be meetings about that later. All right, let's go ahead and jump into take a look at this again. So let's move forward. Again, you see kind of the timer. this is why it was. So I think that if you look at this, you'll see that this thing is kind of what we saw with the weather. So this was kind of a generalized solution that they use for these layouts and these layouts. They add the logo, move things over, but obviously they kind of created a look to make that actually, that's a look that they used and just customized it for each thing. A thing to also look at though is there is, you think that this is all white, but if you really look at it, there's just a subtle, ever so subtle gradient on that piece there, and a little bit of that again, as Bill was talking about, a little bit of shadow there, and so that it's really it's a pretty subtle thing as they look at it. Now here's where you just were.
Can I make one more comment, Alex? Yeah. Look at the director had that camera off center so that the graphic fit. That was actually the shot before. It was a beautifully composed shot. You've got the ref in the top, you've got the graphic in the bottom, and the entire team is in one place. So that's all by design.
Yeah, and when you look at that, just be clear that that's a cable cam that is panning around the huddle, and I'm sure told to protect for that graphic.
Absolutely.
Like it's so what Bill's made a really good point. That's a pretty complex little choreographing. It's not just they threw the graphic over top of everybody. They told them to protect to the right or protect to the left, and then made that happen. So it's pretty interesting. This is your sweeper or your thing. So of course you have your gratuitous lens flare there in the center, which I found a little garish, to do that way. But I think it's just there because that's the one place that they're not covering up. So you'll see usually what happens with the sweeper is that you have, this is your A roll, and you'll see this is B roll. So so that you're converting, from one to the other. You have to figure out when are you going. So basically, because really when you're looking at this, a big graphic shows up and you cut from one to the other. And so what happened was they were on A, B. So you see that if you look at it, this is your sweeper or your stinger is designed to distract you from the fact that we're cutting from a close up to the wide right there. So just cut there and you program that in. You say the stinger's going to go, and on this frame you make the change. But we're there distracting you. I'll be honest, I don't like this very much. Just because
here's the thing I hated at the end. Go ahead and play it forward just a little bit. The glitch at the end. I saw that first time I saw that, I thought, oh, that's a switcher mistake, like a double punch. No, it's animated designed that way.
Yeah, they designed it that way.
Alex, I think the flare works because, first of all, we're looking at it slowly, but it's sort of signaling something's going to happen here, so be prepared for it. And 3D graphics
when you look at it in real time,
look really horsey if they just
it doesn't really tell you. It doesn't really tell you. Like it all happened. Like we went through it slowly, but if you watch it, it's kind of like, it's really fast. I mean, it's 15 frames or so, and but I just don't know if the flare. The flare is there, I think, just to cover up the fact that there's a big open space when they switch. They switched here, like it really jumps quickly into that. Now, I will say that the thing that is nice when you look at this as well is when you're thinking about your 3D elements, what you're noticing here is that this is a textured front. So a lot of times, for those of you who don't do a lot of this, we have usually 5 or 6 different things that we can control. So basically you have this front, you have the bevel, you have the depth, you have the other bevel, and then you have the back. And sometimes there might be 1 or 2 other attributes, but we can control typically how big this bevel is and what's on the bevel. We can control what's on this side piece. We control what's on the back bevel and what's on the back face. And so what you're seeing here, and this is a great way to separate stuff out. Now, I normally would have made the bevel itself something else as well. Just something slightly different to give it a little bit more shape. But what they did here is obviously the bevel itself, as well as the depth, is just a basic chrome, and then this was some kind of texture that they added to it to that front area. But you do want to always think when you're doing 3D lettering of that kind of creating some delta, some difference in those areas is useful.
I'd throw some ambient occlusion in around this so that it causes the letters to pop off of each other a little bit better.
They're not really over top of each other to get much ambient occlusion.
Well,
but
next, they could be showing shadows. The other thing I noticed is the edges seem a little ratty. Is it just because of the playback system we're using, or what? Aliasing.
I think any aliasing that we're seeing here is just because of the compression. This was just pulled off of YouTube, so I don't think there's actually, I don't think that's there. So here is your, now one thing to notice here is that what I will say is they didn't use the telestration very much. Like, you barely ever saw it. And when you're watching something like some of the Sunday night football and Thursday night football, a lot of times you see them use it every play. And I really felt like they definitely chose not to use it that much. Also notice that there is a little bit of a black background to it to really have it set itself out. So it's not just yellow over top. It's got a little bit of a shadow operation there, kind of to the side here. Kind of goes that direction, just to kind of separate it from what it's looking like there. Does look like someone did it with their finger, just based on the way it was done, as opposed to a pen. There's your thing again. This is What's interesting about this lower third is they would pop this out. For some reason, I had trouble finding it because a lot of times they just cut to it the way we just saw here, where this is giving you a little extra information. I really felt like I wanted it to go out and then back in, but usually it either showed up out, or if it popped out, it did slide out. It would slide out, but then it would just disappear. And there's a lot of places where I felt like these graphics didn't feel complete.
Do the 3 dashes at the bottom indicate any kind of data, or is that just
timeouts?
Design? Oh, that's timeouts.
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't figure out what they were representing.
Right. One thing I thought was a nice little addition is not only did they have the time remaining, but if you look at it, I'm going to back up here. It was just like one of those little things, like you're going, oh, that's such a nice little taste here. When it fades in,
the shadow,
the shadow on the field,
the play clock. I was like, oh, that's a nice touch. So it's got a little shadow on the field when it pops up. That gives it a little bit more physical stuff. I do think that this has really come to a whole new level. Like, it's semi-transparent over the field as if it was painted.
The players,
keyed out on the players. You have things that are hard, like green on green. So you have green costumes on green background. I mean, they're very different greens, but still, it's that's come a long way. Like, if you go back and look at old archive footage, the technology to make that work has been has come a great deal. Let's jump into some more questions.
And more questions coming in from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Is there a preferred screen location for graphics to be noticed most? Lower left, top right, etc.
Bill?
Well, in the West, we start with our eyes in the upper left. People will tell you that is a good starting place because people are used to reading that way. I'm not sure. In video, one thing, and you've seen this in example of that little flash on the sweeper that Alex was talking about, we are conditioned as human beings to look at the brightest objects in our field of vision first. So often, if they want your eyes to go to the upper left, something will flash in the upper left. If they want you to orient to the center, as they did with that big graphic, those flashes will tend to bring your eye to that first. So most designers use brightness as one of the things to signal to you where they expect your eye to be before an element pops up. That's just kind of old typical.
Yeah,
design.
Generally, obviously, a bright light in the center is what will get your eye. That's what you're going to notice it the most, if you're talking about noticing it the most. But a lot of times what's happening is that during the graphics, as we start to put those out, the designer, if they do it well, is conditioning you to know where things are. You're going to, over time, while you watch the game, the goal is, I'm not going to try to put too much out in front of you, but I'm going to make sure you know where to look for how many timeouts there are, how much time is left on the clock, or how much time is left on. And they keep on putting everything in the same place, and they move things around. That moving, because the other thing we're really good at is, as almost all animals are good at seeing things that are moving. So if we move something, flash something, jiggle something, do all those things, it's going to bring your eye to those, to look at those. By leaving them still, it tells your brain you don't have to pay attention to that right now. By adding something that's moving on top of that, what's nice is it's there, but it's just there for your reference, so to speak. So that's kind of the nice part of that process, is that it just tells you, you always have it to go look at, But if they moved it all the time, it would actually create a lot of stress. So when we have some people that I've worked with that put logos in and they're moving all the time. And what happens is it creates viewer stress because their brain is constantly seeing it moving, and so you want to have things move when you want people to look at stuff and stop when you don't. Let's go to the next question.
Next one in from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. Camera operators during these kinds of events often have preview available on their camera to see effects. Is it difficult for them to make framing decisions as the script goes along?
Usually they're given some direction to it, and a lot of times the camera operator will have their camera and some return. So either program or preview, as you said before, and sometimes they can switch between those, depending on how they have it set up. But the most common thing to do is to have them have their own camera plus the program, and that way they can, when they're doing those moves, they can see the graphic over top of it if they're doing a live move through that process. It's pretty rare for them to see preview, but it is very common for them to see program. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, a common word heard on comms is woof.
Next question.
Next one in from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. Not a graphics question, but I was impressed by the cable cam programming. The switch from the booth to a 90+ degrees sweep with zoom. I think it was after the first TD.
Yeah, there's a lot of artists that work on this, and I define artists as just people who are just amazing at what they do. And when you look at the Super Bowl in front of 100 million people, you're looking at the best people in the world that do what they do. The cable operators, so the cable cam typically is run by two people. One person's managing the position of the camera, and the other one's panning and tilting that camera. At least that's the last time I saw it. So they were sitting next to me on a show, and they'll call out like, okay, we're going to do this kind of move, and they know what they want to do in that area, and the two people work together all the time in every game, and so these folks really know how to make that work, and so you'll see these really creative camera, cable cams because they're doing it, and they, you only see little bits of it. You got to remember that they're doing it all day, all game. They're just moving. They're serving shots up to a technical director that is amazing, with camera operators that are amazing, with EBS operators that are amazing. So it's an incredible place to work because every person is at the top of their game. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, I love the 3D model of the player on the lower left side. Would that be modeled in Cinema 4D and delivered via Unreal Engine?
Oh, that was a graphic, like a painted graphic. So I don't know if it was a CG. They may have done some of that, but those graphics were most likely built in Cinema 4D and then delivered back to the graphics engine or Maya. So those are the kind of things that might be delivered back in. But because it didn't really, that animation very well could have been all done in Cinema and then rendered out and then provided as a graphic because it didn't have to move in real time. The thing you typically notice with real time stuff is a lot of times you have aliasing along the edges and stuff like that. But we'll see as we go forward. I don't know if the other one did. I think that stuff is getting handled over time. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, and also think about, who are the people coming up who are watching football as young people? They're people who've been playing video games forever. So the gamification of characters like that perfectly fits in with making this a comfortable graphic environment for both the older folks who want, a bigger type because they might be watching on their phone. I've noticed the scores and things like that, the blocks getting bigger. But then you've got something like this video game meme-ish kind of look that is going to appeal to the young people. So you got a little bit of, they're always thinking, how do we involve everybody? How do we put things out that serve all the different kinds of audiences who may be watching this gigantically popular event?
Good, Mitchell.
It's also worth noting that the evolution of graphics, especially in sporting events, I'm thinking back to the old Chiron days where Chiron never put just white type on a background. They actually did a dimensional drop shadow over black, so that type would always fit over anything, whether it was light or dark, because of the background. A lot of the graphics carry that tradition of having a background or some kind of a drop shadow that allows it to be placed over any kind of a background. Kind of neat.
Next question.
Next question in from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. For someone who wants to start looking more deeply at live graphics, what are some key features to start looking for?
It's a good question. So I think that the best thing to do is look at what other people do. And again, the best thing to do is look at what people are doing for broadcast, and live sports is probably your place to look. if you want to learn something, learn from the best. Whether it's soccer or other things. So broadcast, network broadcast TV and big sports graphics are going to be where you see the best design. And so you want to look at what they're doing. And so, there's a couple things they're going to have: a lower third, they're going to have a sweeper or a stinger. They're going to have, some data graphics. They're going to have those types of things. And so you start breaking those down. And we're going to keep on doing this about once a month. Last month we did playoffs. This month we're doing the Super Bowl. And it was really popular. That's why we came back with the Super Bowl. Next month we'll probably do either sweepers or super sources. And we'll keep on doing this about once a month just because we'll dig into these different things and how they're being used. And I know we do it about once a year. When we look at these things because they change. But you want to really look at the best and look at what they're doing and really pay attention to how they're using that data. There you go, Bill.
Also, just study traditional typography. It's not going to tell you everything because this is a specialized piece of it, but you're going to learn a whole different language, M space, N space, leading, kerning, all these things that people who deal with type understand really fundamentally. And there is a descriptor for almost every aspect of a character. And you put a capital A on the page, a typographer will be able to talk to you for 1 hour about that A, where it came from, what its aesthetic is, how it fits in the background, whether the edges are beveled. There's just a thousand things, literally. And I'm not saying you have to become an expert typographer to do these kind of sports graphics, but you will learn a lot about the language, and that language has come in. So when they say, I want you to track that tighter, you will understand exactly what they are saying because tracking is a thing.
And we're going to keep talking about it. And that's one of the best things to do is to do what we're doing today, which is examine it, talk about it, figure those things out. We may do more of this in after hours as well. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, as processing power available to the user exponentially increases, could you see AR and similar technologies brought to the user's device instead of to the other end?
We've talked about this a lot, is the idea of using game engines to put the graphics on so that you can send a clean signal out. What's interesting is for a lot of broadcasters that has not been warmly received because putting the debris on it also means that it's where it came from. So if we send you a clean video of this stuff, then they like having the debris up there from a copyright perspective. And so we thought people would be excited about that when we first started it. And now we kind of understand that they may or may not be. Next question.
Next one in from Eduardo Augustine in Panama. The timeout indicators felt somewhat odd. Usually, how long does it take to plan these graphics for Fox? No, they usually play safe.
These take, people start working on these for months or years, a year or months. I think that everybody does the timeout indicators differently. But this is probably the most subtle way to do it. And it kind of calls back, Fox tends to be a little bit bigger type, a little bit bigger sections. The glow has been used for a long time in Fox stuff. So I think that that's probably where that came from. Let's go ahead and jump forward a little bit. So we have so we saw that here. We saw the little overloop, and there it goes. He runs down. Yay. Here's another larger graphic. So again, the best thing to do, and this is why I have this, but is to record these things, is to look at them. So they're still following some of the same things now. And if you watch it play out, you're seeing those lines moving across. So you can go back, see how those lines back there. Now, the graphic is probably its own thing. So it's not like this was this part here and all of this was a lot of this can be rendered ahead of time, but this stuff has to be, of course, added in real time, as those things go through. So it's a mixture of the things being overlaid, over a backing area. But you want to always look at how are they showing different things. Now here's the touchdown here, so you can see there was a kind of a weird,
kind of a comic booky kind of thing.
Well, the other thing that happened that I thought was odd was that it kind of. Yeah, so this is a little glitch. I noticed it during the show, and I couldn't.
Yeah, they programmed in those glitches. This is what I hate, Alex, where they make it look like a mistake.
No. This is a mistake. This is not. So Oh, never mind. This is not a mistake. This is me jumping. I cut to another take. Never mind. It's not a mistake. So anyway, so here you have the graphic, and you can see what's interesting here is that splat is being used as a holdout mat for the graphic that's happening underneath it. So it splats in, it goes, boom, and then they use that. They bring in the graphic underneath the splat, using the splat as a holdout mat for parts of it, and then it fades in, and you can see how they're using another kind of splat there to bring the person in. And this is the stuff that, it's messy. I think Courtney doesn't like the messiness of it.
It's kind of like Marvel, the way they do their...
it's very kind of the anime kind of Marvel-y kind of thing.
Expect a Batman, pow, zoom,
so
for the 60s Batman.
It's for the kids. It's for the kids. I thought it was huge. And again, this is the one place that obviously they have the graphics for every person that might be able to be part of that. So this is a...
but one thing, the crowd cheers, you're in a sports bar and you turn and you see that, or right. You know exactly what happened. You don't have to hear it. You can be peripheral on the way to the bathroom and you go, oh my God, touchdown.
Yeah. And you can notice, so little things to notice also is it's not just that it's touchdown. So it's got the splat that it goes through it. It pops up and it's shaking. See how the touchdown has got
the whole thing is
little animated, little animated shake, to the touchdown to give it a little bit more energy, so.
Yeah, that's a film bob and weave, that's a film.
Right. That we don't have anymore, but we like.
Yeah, I know.
We added it back. So, but the main thing is that it adds just a little bit of energy, to it. I think is the goal there, and it's really subtle, and you barely see it. This is the most bling flag indicator I've ever seen in a football thing. It's a flag. It was like I was kind of like, wow, I thought that was. So it's a big. Usually there's like a little red
visual
thing or
caution tape.
Yeah, but it's like visual caution tape. But the entrance of it of the echoing edges, was that was a lot. And again, the thing is, even if you're never going to use it, if you're trying to get into graphics or you really want to get good at this, the best way to do is sit down and just literally redo what somebody else has done. As close to verbatim as you can, as it's just such a great way to train, because you'll learn a lot about what they're doing with keyframes and how they're doing this, how they're doing these edges and so on and so forth. It's just if you're trying to train, there's no class that can teach you just trying to reproduce something that someone spent millions of dollars on. Let's go to, so here it is, blah, blah, blah. There's a flag. Yep. Let's see, here's the. So this is another sweeper. So this is a more traditional stinger, in my opinion, which is that it really fills the whole frame. So you're seeing this thing come by. The last one I felt like is a little light. This one really fills the frame. So now you can cut. You've got you've got a couple frames there that you can cut to from that's what this is used. This is a vehicle to get from this to that, and that look that we had for the 3D graphics is kind of carried on, with the front bevel, with the front bevel. But look at there's a little bit of texture on that back end. Look at the soft lighting that goes across the black area. So it's not just black. The brushed steel. I only say that I had to do a lot of brush steel, and one of the ways we used to do brush steel, the way we would do a brush steel like this would be, and you can see that they also put that brush steel only on that front face, so they protected those edges. If you look at it, right here. So this is brush steel. The way we would do brush steel, or a lot of times, is we would take noise in Photoshop and then give it a motion blur, a really high motion blur, and it'll create all the serrations that you need. And then we'd take grunge maps that we built and throw them over top of it, and it would look just exactly like that.
and push, and you could push the curves on that to really emphasize the contrast.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, but again, it's, and look at so that when you think about it's kind of a, let's see, let's just play this out. Okay, so you see how it kind of, it pauses there and then it goes. And so the way that works there, if you're looking at the motion, if you're looking at the F curve of that, what that is it goes up like this, and then it goes like that. So it moves. There's like a isoprams here. But when you do the animation, that's what it's going to look like. It's going to go up and pause there. It's not going to change as much in the F curve, and then it's going to go back out again, and then with an ease out. But that's that's what that looks like, and it's just kind of a nice, quick way to kind of bring that in. This was one of the commercials. I don't know how many commercials we're actually going to get to here, but what I thought was interesting, the only reason I included this one was how many QR codes that we saw. I mean, so a lot of people were throwing QR codes up, and I tried to jump on a lot of them just to see where they went. So this one I think was actually this one went to the Twitter account of the CEO of the company to tell people to follow him, so I thought that was interesting. They're not really trying to get you to do something right now. They're trying to get you to be there in the future when they want to do announcements. But I think that it was interesting. Some of them were very close to being too small. But the thing about QR codes that makes it complicated for the shows, and they used them 3 or 4 times, is some of them came on and came off too quickly, and you can't get your phone out in time. So it was like, the reason I went through it is because I do a lot with QR codes, and so I pay a lot of attention to the QR codes and figuring that out. And so, but you'll notice that they do a bunch of things. They're talking about things, but they're telling you to scan now. They're cutting around, but you'll notice how much they jump around, but they are not going in front of the QR code. They're going very close to in front of the QR code. Look, there they moved it. That might have made it a little harder, but you'll notice that almost everything is as close as they can get to it. And then they give you a nice clear one, but they really need to keep that QR code up for a little while to make that work. So anyway, I just thought we saw a lot of that. Here's just another use of that graphic. So here's one of the things that Mitch was talking about. This is an AR render. And so what's happening here, this is and we're going to bring some folks on to talk about this eventually, but while we talk about this, so what's happening is they are tracking this live. So this is a cable camera, and that cable camera is running, and then they are doing a live track of the camera, and then they're putting this into 3D, as it goes through. And so this is a tricky thing to do well. And you'll notice that they even put they got a little bit of a effective shadow there. So you'll notice that they put a shadow on the field that's down here. So that is part of that graphic, is to, shadow the field and make everything a little darker down there. It technically doesn't work totally if you look at the highlights on his helmet, but that's a whole other thing. One thing I will say is that I thought that the rendering here looked good. A lot of times if this is a real-time graphic, you see a little of it there. Hold on. You see a little of the sizzling along these edges when it's running. Like, I can see it. It's not as bad as it normally is, but when if you look at the front edge of this 7 and watch when we go past it, you can see some sizzling. See that there's a little bit of sizzling on that edge, and that's indicative of real-time rendering. Real-time reflection rendering is got a problem with that. But I will say that this is some of the best real-time stuff I've seen, as far as aliasing and so on and so forth. Now, so this is a pretty difficult thing to do, and we're going to see more and more of this kind of AR type thing. There was one thing. Can anyone of our panelists point out the thing that this is what I saw this and I was like, this is really impressive, and there's going to be a whole lot of meetings about it. And why will there be a lot of meetings?
The perspective on the shadow is not moving the way you would normally expect. It's actually tracking the shot.
No, it wouldn't move, because it'd be a standard light source with something that's not moving. So the graphics not moving.
It moves at a different pace, which it should.
I don't think the
there's
shadow
three different planes of graphic there that are going by. The first quarter is on one, the logos are on another, and the scores are on another.
Yeah, but I don't think the shadow would change, because it's a state. It's not. We're changing the camera position, not the. If it was a reflection, it would change, but a shadow, it would stay the same. So I don't think that's the issue. So the issue is not a technical issue. It's the fact that what they did here is they put it in. I'm sure the colors were correct when they put them into the 3D graphic.
Yeah, it's not green.
And then they lit it with a white, and it's very desaturated and very not their colors. And as someone who's worked especially in corporate for a long time, I was like, oh, there's going to be a lot of conversations about the color of those logos. The only time you see the logos that far off in a color perspective is in these AR things. And so everything's a little washed out because of the way they use the lights on the real-time thing. And, we, given that you really don't see much highlight change or lighting change, we would have absolutely mapped these on as a full diffuse cover, so that the color stayed stable. And then we would have just done a specular highlights and some shadows in there. So I would have done ambient pass or specular highlights and shadows, and made sure that my 3D objects were rendered with the proper color. so they look really, really washed out. And as someone who's done a lot of these and been in those meetings, I was like, oh, that's going to be meetings. That's a meeting problem. Anyway, so it's a fun thing. So you see how much richer the color is there, and see how it looks washed out here. And I'm sure that when they put it on the logos, it looked fine. But when they lit it, it changed the nature of it. So you see those logos, and then you immediately cut to that. And what it should have been is that richness that you see there. And the reason that didn't happen is because they were doing it. This is something you just needed to map the diffuse on and take over the diffuse colors, not necessarily render them, from there, in my opinion. And I believe that there'll be some people, I've been in those meetings, about color. Color is when it comes to logos, color is a big deal. I think we have here's the Patrick Mahomes version of that piece there that we saw earlier. So this is, let's go ahead. I think we got 2 questions.
And we got one from Douglas Carmichael here. Jonas mentioned that the English engineers Fox brings over for the Super Bowl are probably BBC engineers assisting with the HLG to HDR10 and SDR. Being an audio person, what does that mean?
HLG and HDR10 are 2 versions of high dynamic range. So it would be, BBC is kind of pushing that a little bit more on the envelope, and so those are HLG is the hybrid log gamma, and HDR10 is the Samsung version. I mean, it's a general format. So HDR10 Plus is more like Samsung doesn't want to pay Dolby, but HDR10 is a more generalized format that is there. And so those, oftentimes this productions are done in HLG. So the pipeline is HLG. What it goes out as might be something different like HDR10. HLG is easy because there's no metadata. So it just has a curve applied to it. So it's much easier to work in a truck with HLG than it is HDR10. But that's probably what he's talking about. Next question.
Next question in from Wayne Ma in Park City, Utah. Little off topic, but what did you think about the loudness of the stadium noise? I found it very annoying.
Well, it's not that the stadium was loud. It's that they turned it up. They have mics. So they're trying to give you a feel of what it's like there, so you can hear the things that are there. And they'll make conscious decisions. If they don't do that, you won't hear much of anything. Those mics the mics that they're using for the announcers are pretty specific. But there's a lot of audience mics out there that they're using, and they're mixing it in, and it gives you a sense of who's yelling and what's going on, and gives you a sense of that back and forth. And I think that's what they're trying to do. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, what would they be using to physically paint the graphics? A Wacom tablet?
There's a telestrator hardware that does it, if you're talking about the telestrator. And a lot of times it's just a finger. There are some ones with pens. The ones here look so undetailed that I'm guessing that they were fingers to do that. But there's a piece of, there's hardware that does that. Next question.
Serge Blondin from Montreal, Canada, asking, was the YouTube 4K signal in HDR?
I don't know. Like I was watching it. I was mostly interested in the record, so I needed the 4K so that I could do the 1080p record so that I could show it on this show. And so I was doing that, and I actually didn't pass it through an HDR monitor. Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know about the YouTube, but I downloaded the Fox Sports app on my Fire TV 4K HDR, and it was in HDR 4K if it came off the Fox Sports app. But the live broadcast and the cable carriage, the live broadcast was 720p in LA.
Yeah,
and the live stream from other sources from YouTube seemed to be 1080p. But
yeah, the Foxes does a lot in 720.
Foxes, crazy like a fox. They're conserving their bandwidth.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond asking, did you discuss the augmented reality pan around the entire stadium at the top of the show? Started with Mahomes to Reid to Kelces to Hurts and went around the stadium.
I would have to go back. I might have missed that. I think I was so busy turning it on at the very beginning, and I just got in. I had it recording, but I didn't go back that far. So I might have missed that. I don't think we're gonna. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there was a drone or a helicopter shot at the opening that was mapped into virtual reality, and they moved the graphics as the drone moved. And it must have just been used optical tracking to paste it into AR mode.
And a lot of times they will build a 3D model and scan the space so that they can get, the most accurate view of how that's going to, like what it's going to look like, occlusions, et cetera. Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael again. What would the actual HLG HDR10 SDR conversion process be? Just an FS-HDR or a similar box?
It's a similar box. I don't think it's an actual FS-HDR, but there's a lot of boxes that will do that kind of thing. And basically what you're doing is applying a transfer transfer curve or a LUT to, we're going to go from here to here. So we're taking the colors that are here and then we're going to compact them into here or expand them into there. And that's usually the conversion though is, making sure it works across the board is usually challenging. Next question.
Lyle Haylett from Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Adding to Wayne's off-topic question, what are your thoughts about the low vocal levels in the halftime show?
I did notice that. I didn't quite understand how they couldn't get more gain out of that. I don't have an example of that, but I did notice that it was an odd thing that happened there. Yeah. It seems like something that could be handled, but we'd have to get the audio team in there to tell us what happened there. A couple more graphics before we run out of time. Just want to make sure we got to those questions. This is a kind of a fun graphic here. So you can see this kind of drawn out. So they're tracking along. Now, I think that this happened I'm not sure. Usually this takes a little bit more time. Like this is something that you have to, it's not done live. It's usually done in some kind of post. And so and this is a new graphic. Like I haven't seen this before. And so, what they're doing there is I believe that they're tracking him. They're tracking both of those players. They're tracking them at a base rate and then just following them along and having those graphics reveal, wipe themselves on. I actually, I don't know the tool that's being used, but you can see that it's kind of, put there. The reason that I think that they're tracking it is because see the little errata at the very beginning there? You could kind of do that with, by hand. So that's possible, but it does feel like it's kind of, it's hard to tell whether they're, how they're tracking that. But I thought it was kind of a cool way to show the route in a way that we haven't seen before. So this was a new graphic. So like, for us, like a lot of times in Super Bowl or in another thing, you're like, oh, there's something that I haven't seen before. So this is a graphic that I hadn't seen before, being able to tell you where things are and what they're looking like. And I love the look of this. I hope that we see more of this graphic here. I don't really care about the names on the top, but I think that showing the routes that way in kind of an organic way against the field was very imaginative. And I thought that was really, really cool.
Looking back, you can actually see his tiny stumble of a step that let the receiver get in front of him. It's amazing. If you play it forward, you can just watch the black defender right there. That was going too fast, but he half missed a step and that gave him enough of a little gap to complete the pass right there. He just stumbles a half a time. That's all it takes in the NFL to get a pass completed. Unbelievable.
But you can see that it's being tracked every once in a while. You can see that this is being tracked and comped. Excuse me. Because you can see it miss right there. See when it bounces, the lines slip a little bit right there. So it's a live comp over top of it. Now it may not have been live animated, but it's definitely a live comp because it didn't quite make that bump right there, just right. So, but hopefully we're going to see more of that. And those are, again, it's kind of a spared no expense kind of thing. We saw some more graphics. We're running out of time. There's a flag. I don't know why. I'm getting an alert that something was. Oh, that must have been happening while I was. I was like, why am I getting an alert? And we're going to run out of time here. I'm just trying to see why I even saved this here. This was more of the graphic here. And then under the commercial. And let's see.
By the way, I hated that Bradley Cooper spot.
I thought
It was cute, but I didn't like it.
Let's see, I just wanted to. Oh, this was the. I think this does the animation. Like this is the. See if it. There you can see the slide out that was. See that little slide out, so that, and remember that slide out, not only, it's got an ease in and ease out. It's very fast, but it's got an ease in and ease out to give you a little bit more information, in that area. And that's something you want to kind of pay attention to. The last thing that I was going to show, we're not going to have time to really dig into the Rihanna show. Let's see here. That's the class of, but the last thing I was going to talk about was more graphics.
It was interesting that they said there was so much paint on the field for the logos that was actually, they had to change cleats.
Well, people were falling everywhere. I don't think it was the paint. I think it was just, they did a different kind of grass. This was great. It's probably a whole second hour, but we'd have to get someone on that worked on it to tell us how that actually happened. That was there in case we didn't have enough time. The one thing I will say is I really, really liked the, see if I can show it here. That I thought this was really a fun graphic.
Yeah, particle systems, yeah, sure.
Well, and it's something I think I can do. Like I was looking at it going, oh, how do they do that? But it's, it's particles being pushed in and out. You break something up and pushed in and out, and then you use
the audio noise.
The audio noise to kind of push it back out again. It definitely, and I thought it was going to the music. It wasn't. I looked at it a lot more. It's just an animation, but it bounces up enough that it looks like it's there. Let's see here. There was the thing that I was impressed by. I kept all this here. Oh, there we go. Oops. There. So I will say that this usually doesn't work. So what they're doing here, I don't know. Let's see if we back up a little bit, we'll see them kind of pan into it, I think. So they're panning over. Oh, okay. Yeah. So they're there. So this is a screen. This is an LED wall. That looked really good. And I'm wondering whether, now that I look at it, it's an actual LED wall or whether it was actual TV, or something. Because, so typically they are standing right in front. This is like the little things the weird things that some of us get obsessed with is I hate these graphics behind the host because they always look so marrayed. There's moray, there's all kinds of pixelation, there's all kinds of other things. There's a little pixelation in the logos. But overall, we don't see what we normally see here on a digital wall, which is all kinds of moray and pixelation and all kinds of other things that are breaking it up. It was just nice and clean. And I looked at this a couple of times looking for it, and I had to go back to the I wanted to make sure. I mean, I even wondered whether this is actually a green screen. Like it could be.
That's what I was thinking. It looks like a green screen they tracked in.
It's well keyed. Yeah. But if it's a green screen, the things that you start looking for green screens is up here. You start looking at their hair, and so if it is a green screen in that environment, it was shot really well, so it was.
Also, if it's a physical screen, how do you get the backlight up there on his hair?
Oh, you can put that up there. I think you can do that. Yeah. And I wouldn't worry about the backlight, but I do, it's either a very, very good, because again, you look at things like the little hair detail here, his hair tail, and an Ultimate is capable of doing that. It's just usually broadcasters aren't good enough to do that. I mean, they kind of throw up something that is not cleanly lit. And I feel like they either did a really good job on the key, or they had, and it could be that they did a really good job on the key. But if they did it, it was really well done.
They are very close to that screen. If that's a green screen, there's no spill anywhere I can see.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not, yeah. So whatever they did here, if it was an LED, maybe we can talk to some folks and find out what actually happened there. But whatever they did here, it worked. And I have not seen that work very often, like almost ever. Like every time they cut to this, there's something wrong with it. It looks too LED, the green screen's too soft, the all those other things. And this is the first time I think I've seen that digital background behind somebody where I went, oh, that looks really good. There's a little bit of aliasing down here. So it's not perfect. And that's why it led me, this aliasing right here, along the K is what led me to think it was still some kind of TV and not a CG background. But I don't know for sure. But anyway,
I agree, though. It's got to be pretty tight behind them because they're not using much rim light on them, and they could actually use a little more shoulder and arm definition against that back with a little rim light of some kind because they just fade into the background of the bottom half of their bodies.
Yeah.
That's probably just no depth and exactly what we keep talking about.
Really
if you don't have any space between them and the back.
Yeah. Next question.
Can't light them.
Douglas Carmichael's in with a question. With so many large trucks in such a small place, how would they manage parking and getting them in and out smoothly?
Logistics. They tell them where they want the trucks. There's I don't know how many trucks, but it's probably close to 12, maybe 20. Somewhere between 10 and 20, 12 to 20 trucks that get in there, and they get to go in first. they have priority. There's places that are built for them. That's when they design the stadiums, they design for the trucks. Some of them are sometimes on the inside, some of them are on the outside, but there's 10 to 20 trucks there probably. Maybe even more. There might be 40 of them in there. Yeah. So I mean, it's a big show. Next question.
Next one in from Serge Blondin in Montreal, Canada. Do we know if the broadcaster has access to player tracking systems used by coach?
I don't think so. I think that they actually are pretty careful about not giving them that. So what the coaches have and what the broadcasts have oftentimes are different. The coaches usually have, or a lot of the teams, definitely the league has access to all the camera lanes. But the question is really, I don't think that they want to show what the coaches see, back to the broadcasters. They're pretty careful about what the broadcasters get. Bill, real quick.
Absolutely. Think about the amount of money wagered on this sporting event. Any inside information about what the coach is planning that gets out into the wild by any means can change hundreds of millions of dollars. So that information is locked down like Brinks.
You definitely wouldn't want an errant call at the end of the game. That would be really horrible from a betting perspective. Anyway, I'm just saying. Like,
you're not bitter.
I didn't do it. Like, here's the funny thing is the last thing I'll say is I only watch the game for the graphics. Like, I don't care. The Steelers aren't in it. I don't really care who wins. It was just like snatching, victory, defeat from victory. Like, it was just kind of like, I don't care who wins, but I was like, that's not the way that you want to win, is to have something that was what we would call ticky-tack.
Well, now they have, on the close calls, they went to review them. You had to go to a commercial because there were 45, there were 44 manned cameras and an additional 50 unmanned cameras.
Yeah,
so
that's a lot of cameras.
94 cameras in all. And they covered the replay. And a lot on the replays, when they went to look at the replays, they had 15 to 20 different views of that individual thing to look at.
World. All right, well, that's fun. Thanks to our producers for all the great questions. Thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end making this all work every single morning. It's really great to have all of you here. It's a fun show that we get to put together, and we can't do it. It takes a village, and what's interesting is the whole village is part of it. So it's just fantastic. So thanks to everybody. And we traveled the Tlaloc Traversal, 42,000 miles, 68,000 kilometers. 384 bananas for scale. Just a reminder that tomorrow we've got audio pathology. So Marty Ateas is going to be here to talk to us about that. And others will be here to answer your questions about how to figure out what's going on when your audio isn't working. The reader workshop is at 3 p.m. Tomorrow. So just a quick reminder of that. And
today. It's today.
Oh, it's today. Today's one.
Tuesday.
You moved it to Tuesday from Wednesday. I got it. Okay, great. All right, very good. Looking good. All right, we will now jump into After Hours. Oh, I didn't understand what I was looking at. There's live sports behind the scenes in the BO room now, right now. Jeff Keithley. I didn't understand the note. When I looked down, I was like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to say there. So, not enough information. I was like, out of context. I was like, I don't understand.
I didn't realize Alan Smithy worked on our show. I just saw his name go by. That's excellent. If you're watching this on YouTube, you probably missed the whole second hour because the NFL didn't like it.
Sorry. Sometimes you just have to be here. That's all I'm saying. They won't cut us off. They don't cut us off